All right, so slump molding is a technique that a lot of potters use when they want to make something out of a slab and they want to hand build it. So the slump mold part is really anything that you can drape a piece of clay over. It's a mold, and you can use anything you can find in your home. You don't have to have what I have. You could even use clay. Sometimes potters will sculpt up like a negative space with clay, like a mound of clay, and put plastic over it and then lay their slab over top of that. And the purpose of that is that you want to capture the shape or the form of your mold. So if I wanted to make a big bowl that had the interior shape of this big plastic jug in the foot, I could do that by just laying a slab over top. So that's pretty neat, because if you really kind of explore your home, you're going to discover a lot of really interesting forms that you could slump some clay over. And that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to roll out a slab, and then we're going to put a barrier between the mold and your slab, because we don't want it to stick to the surface of whatever you're making. And keep in mind that clay is going to shrink, and as it shrinks, it's going to get tighter around your mold. So you have to learn how and when to take it off the mold, or it's going to crack as it dries. So I would like ceramics too. You guys are making this too, but yours has to be large. Yours has to be 12 inches from rim to rim. Ceramics 1, yours can be smaller, but I don't want it to be too small. I'm looking for you guys to expand your size a little bit so that you can really learn how to work with a heavier piece of clay. Because if you're just making things that are like the size of your hand all the time, you're missing out on a lot of learning. So for this slab, I want you to find something that's like at least 6 inches wide at the foot, right? So this is about the right size here. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is roll out my slab. And your slab should be about, I don't know, a ½ inch thick, because we're going to be pressing a texture into it. And it's going to be pretty thin, so we really don't need that much clay, even to make this big thing. So I'd say, I don't know, maybe 3 sort of grabs, 3½. And we're going to cut parts of it off. You want to make a little bit more than what you need, because you're going to cut off the rim later and add another rim. So you're probably not going to know where to cut it off until you take it off your slump mold. So I always like to make a little extra just to compensate for that. All right, so I've got my lump of clay. I'm just wedging it by using gravity. I'm just dropping it on the table right now, just to get it all into one form. And then I'm going to wedge it up a bit. Wedging is always important. It's good for you to practice learning how to wedge a bigger piece of clay too. Doing the chrysanthemum wedging, so that's kind of like pushing in the middle and then curling my fingers up around and kind of rotating it to the left, sort of in a circle. So pushing in, rotating, pushing in, rotating. Okay. Now that I've got it sufficiently wedged, I'm going to drop it on the table again, and I'm going to try to get it into a nice circular round form. Roll it on the table. Close up those seams. Okay. Then I'm going to kind of pat it into a pancake shape. moving it around as I go. You can see my ring mark in there. So when you have a slab of clay and you're throwing out a slab and you're rolling out a slab, keep in mind that those clay particles, you want them to be kind of spread out and kind of overlapping each other in different directions. If you take a slab of clay and you only roll it in one direction, you're pushing all of those clay particles in one direction. So when it starts to dry, it's going to curl up like this. That's bad. It's called warping. We don't want our slabs to warp. So to prevent that, you want to kind of throw it out like this in a bunch of different directions. And when you roll it with the rolling pin, you also want to roll it in different directions. So all those clay particles do this. So when they dry, they're going to kind of dry in all different directions, and it's not going to warp as much. You're almost like creating a thread or a weave with the clay particles. If you do not have a rolling pin at home, I noticed that some of the mugs that were submitted with the pinch technique, but you're not going to get points, right, for submitting a pinch mug, because that's not the technique I'm teaching you. I'm teaching you how to use slabs right now. So if you're like, well, I don't have a rolling pin, you don't have to use a rolling pin. You can use a plastic cup from the kitchen, a glass cup from the kitchen. Anything really that is round and kind of smooth and long will work. So I'm going to roll it out. I go back and forth once, and then that's enough, right? It's really going to stick if I do more. Flip it, and maybe even kind of throw it a bit, put it in a different spot, and then roll it out in a different direction. I'm just going to keep doing that until I get about 1/2 inch of thickness, and it's big enough to slump over whatever I'm slumping it over. Make sure to move it around on the table so it doesn't stick. Once it gets bigger, you have to do kind of 4 rolls, because that rolling pin isn't going to cover the whole thing anymore. Try to make it as even as possible, because these are going to be the foot in the wall of your piece. We're all going to be in the thickness of the slab. Depends too, of course, on the surface that you're rolling this on. If you've got a plastic table, it tends to stick worse. If you have a board, it will be better, because the board is porous and it kind of absorbs the water of the clay. Okay. So pretty much there. I think it's a little thinner than 1/2 inch, and that's mostly because I needed to make it bigger. That's okay. All right, so I'm going to pick it up and put it back down again before I press any texture in it, just so it's not completely stuck to the table. So now I want you to experiment with carving textures and pressing textures. So first thing I'm going to do is kind of clean this up on both sides. I'll use my rib tool that has this kind of funky texture on it. I want you to think about what this bowl is for. Choose your slump mold based on what you want to put in this bowl. So, maybe you love eating pasta. This is going to be your pasta bowl. And what is a good pasta bowl to you? Like, which one do you grab in your kitchen when you go eat pasta? That's a good question. You might just be saying, well, I just grab the one that my mom puts in front of me. But once you get to the point where you're like, cooking for yourself and fixing your own meals and stuff, you're going to notice that you have certain favorites. And there's a reason for that. Because you're like, well, I don't like that cereal bowl because I can't put as much cereal in it as I want to eat. Or that ice cream bowl is really the best because I can let my ice cream get all soupy. So you have to think about which surface is the inside, because we're going to texturize the other side as well. The inside of any functional vessel can't be too grooved, because the bacteria is going to get in there and do its thing. So I'm going to say that this is going to be the inside. So I've scraped a texture, and now I'm going to use this little, I can't remember who gave this to me, maybe Miss Shank Tiffany. This is a little boot for snow, right? Little snow boot for a kid, and Beckett's feet aren't big enough yet, so they're still in my classroom, but I'm going to use the bottom of the boot to create a cool texture here. And I'm stamping it kind of deep, but I'm going to smooth it out a bit because this is the inside. And I just think that's the coolest texture. It looks like a peanut. And then because it's the inside, I'm going to just, I don't know, run my fingers over the really raised areas a little bit without losing my fun texture here. And then when I stamp out the other side, this is also going to get a little flatter. So I'm going to flip it very carefully, and then I'm going to do the same thing to this side. But this is the outside, so this can be more grooved. Because there's nothing that's going to be, there's no food that's going to be on the outside or get stuck on the surface of the outside. I want the same texture. Maybe I'll push it a little deeper. So this would be kind of like the first texture, and the extra textures would be what I put on it once after I make the bowl. Okay, so I'm going to very carefully make sure it's not stuck. Just lift it up. If it happens to get stuck and you have to scrape it off, you do have to start over. Okay, so I'm going to just sort of put that aside for a second, and I'm going to grab my mold, which is this plastic jug, and I need to put something in between this and this, or this is just going to stick. You can put paper towel, but I like to use plastic because I can still kind of mold this onto it and get the shape of this foot. It's hard to see because it's white, but there's a little bit of a foot right there. So I'm just going to drape this plastic over and make it kind of as taut as I can, because all of this texture of the plastic is going to show up on my mold. I can even stick the bag inside here. I don't want there to be air in there though. That's going to create an issue. Okay. All right, so this side is the inside, so that's going to go on top. Very carefully lift it up. And I'm going to find the center and very gently just lay it on top. Kind of move it to the center. Now you might have a moment where you're like, I like it just like that. I like these floopy wings. I want my bowl to look just like that. I know it's going to be tempting. It's tempting to do that, but I want you to learn this technique. So I do not want floopy bowls with wings, okay? I want your slab to form around your mold. That's the purpose of using this mold, right? Okay? So you might be asking yourself, well, what do I do with these weird wings now? Well, what I like to do is kind of find sort of 4 points like this, and I push the sides of those points in to the mold. And this is really going to depend on the shape of your mold. You might have something that's a big bowl shape and you won't need to do this, but mine kind of goes straight up, so I have to. And we're going to create something called darts. If you like to sew and you've used patterns before, you will probably know what a dart is. A dart is when you cut a triangle out of something and you fold it in on itself. That's what we're going to do here. I'm going to take a sharp tool, and this part I want you to really watch. On the right side of the dart, I'm going to cut a line, and then I'm going to unfold that extra clay until it seems to sit over that flap. And I want to cut it off with about 1 inch of extra so that I have something to attach it to. So let me turn that so you can really see. Okay, so I cut it and then I folded it over, and I have this extra inch that I'm going to score. I'm going to score here and here, and then fold it over and paddle it shut. So take your scoring tool, which could be a fork or whatever you're using. Make sure to score it deep. Take a tiny little bit of water. You can use your sponge. And then you're just going to lay it over like this. And then I would take a paddle, which could really be anything. It could be your rolling pin. It could be a piece of wood. It could be anything that is going to paddle that down. It's fine. I'm going to take my scoring tool and I'm going to just scrape that so that there's no seam anymore, and I'm going to sort of hide the fact that I did that. Stamp some more boot in there. And on the inside, you're going to have to clean that up when you remove this. You'll have to clean that up. All right, and this is good extra clay. Make sure to re-wedge it and don't let it dry out. All right, so we're going to do that to all 4 little wings here. And I'm going to work quick at this point so that I can show you the end of this demo. Score it. Add some water to it. Make sure the sides are really on there. You want it to be kind of closed tightly. Paddle it. Paddling is a great way to sort of compress clay and make 2 pieces of clay become 1. Scrape it closed. Retexturize it. Cut. Form. Score. Overlap. Close that seam. Texturize. And 1 more. Cut. This one's kind of funky. Okay, so you might notice here that there's, the edge and the rim of this is all over the place. This is the part that I was talking about to make extra, because when you take this off, we're going to probably do some measuring to make sure it's as tall as it needs to be all around the rim, and then we're going to cut it off, and then we'll add some interesting rim to this to finish it off. Okay, this is just the body, right? We still have to do all the other elements, which is, even a bowl has a rim and a foot. Probably not a handle, unless you really want it to have one, and then I'm gonna just make sure that it's pressed into that little foot, because I like that groove, and that's gonna help it sit nice and flat on the table too. You could even take this rolling pin and just do a little flat roll across the top, so that it's nice and flat. And then you could texturize it a little bit if you wanted to. You didn't want to lose that texture, but you wanted it to be flat. All right, so this is the trick. Once you do this, you have to really babysit it, because I'm going to show you something. I did this on purpose, actually, because I wanted to show you what it would look like if you didn't take it off the mold. This is what's going to happen to it if you don't take it off the mold and you let it sit out. Okay, it's going to start shrinking, and it's not going to have anywhere to go because that plastic mold doesn't give, and it's going to just crack. It's going to crack at the seam right down and open up. Okay, so that's what we don't want. And then this is what it's going to look like on the inside. So we're going to clean it up, right? We don't want those folds, and they look cool, but this is the inside of your pot, and you don't want the bacteria to grow in those grooves if you're going to use this for your spaghetti or your ice cream or whatever. So how do I babysit this? Well, what I would do is if you're going to be home and you're going to be in your room or you're going to be there for another hour or two, I would just let it sit out, because then you can watch it and you can go over and touch it. The goal here is you want to lift it off while it's pre-leather hard, which means that you could still move it a little bit, but it hasn't suctioned itself off on here yet, which is going to do pretty quickly. But when you lift it off and you put it right side up, it has to hold its shape. It can't be flopping in or out, or you've pretty much, wasted the mold part. It needs to form around that first. And once you get it off of there and you feel like it's kind of pre-leather hard and ready to work with, you want to spray it down just a little bit and wrap it up real tight, because you don't want it to dry out anymore, because the next step is going to require adding more clay and cutting into it and retexturizing it and adding feet maybe. So it needs to be in a good place to do that. Okay? Any questions? I see Lizzie says, do we let our mug dry out? Yes, but you want to drape it. You want to lightly drape it with plastic so that it doesn't dry too fast. If you let it just sit out, there's a big risk that your handle is going to break off your mug body. And if it starts to crack and break off of there, it's really hard to fix that. So dry it really slow, especially considering you guys have the opportunity to dry it slow, because we're not firing these anytime soon. Any other questions? Any questions about the slump mold slab building?
It's okay that we don't have that started, right? Like, we've just been working on our mugs.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm giving you guys till the end of class to do your mugs, but I wanted to show you this step.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sort of double duty here. We will be ready to make these once we get back, and I sadly won't see you till next Friday, so I didn't want you guys to get too far behind. All right, guys, so you got 10 minutes left of class. By the end of class, you need to have posted some photos of your finished mugs. So that is your goal for the next 10 minutes. And, if you didn't finish your clues, just keep working on it outside of class and get it posted when you have time. And I am going to put this in a really obvious place. If you put it somewhere where you don't notice it, you will forget and it will dry out. So, or either that or set your timer on your phone to go check your piece. I do that sometimes, it's helpful. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. And I encourage you guys to spend a little bit more time this weekend really looking through that website and checking out everybody's work, because it really is telling the story of this year, and pieces are really impressive. So take the time to do that. Maybe even shoot a peer an email or a text that says, hey, I loved your piece in the show. So I've been drying my mugs for a couple days now, and under a piece of plastic, and they're like post leather hard. So what that means is It's still kind of dark gray, which is the color of your clay when you're working with it. But it's really, really hard. Like if I broke this handle, it would be unrepairable. But they're drying nicely. I haven't had to do any repairs. So you're really just hoping that your handle will stay connected here and that you're not going to get any cracks. This is where we would see cracks here, or maybe if there's too much water on the bottom of your foot, you could see a crack here. So just babysit them, take good care of them until they're dry. And you take even better care of them after they're dry, right? Because then they're the most fragile at that point.